The worst thing you can ever do is someone you don't really know, cold emails. Don't say, hey, can I pick your brain? Don't say, let's go grab a coffee.
No, they don't need their brain.
No, exactly. I'm going to sound like a complete asshole, but I'm like, but why? Like, whatever am I going to do with this? So inadvertently, I stumbled upon this where when I email people or I contact them about hanging out, I say, I'm going to bribe you. And I said this, I'm going to bribe you with the best damn chocolate chip cookie you've ever had. And so that was always like interesting. Let's do this.
The world runs on people and emotion, and it has nothing to do with like zeros and ones or logic. Sometimes it's literally like irrational emotion of just like, I just want to help this guy because he's a good dude. Literally, I do it selfishly because I'm fascinated. I'm like, at the end of the day, I get a high off of seeing people tell me about the things that they love to do and create. And that's just me. And maybe that's not for everybody, but like, I just have an addiction to being around people that are passionate about what they're creating in the world, period.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Community Made Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gaynard. Now, as you know, this season is all about how to grow, nurture, and amplify your business relationships. In the first few episodes of this season, I shared why proximity is power and how who you surround yourself with is who you become. I shared 3 unique stories which served as examples of how to reach the unreachable and befriend celebrities and billionaires, along with my playbook on how to foster deep and genuine relationships with people at conferences and networking events, even if you're an introvert. And in the last episode, I shared how to become a catalyst of sorts by hosting mastermind dinners and other unique live experiences. So today I thought I would bring on some highly qualified friends of mine to give you a little bit of a behind the scenes peek into their world. My guests are Dan Martell and the great Shaa Orwell. Both of these men are gems. Dan believed in the concept of MMT probably before I did. I mean, he definitely took a leap of faith to support us as a speaker at our first event, and I will never forget him for that. There's also one thing to add on that front. Dan delivered a talk that fundamentally shifted the tone of the event because it was a very vulnerable talk where he was almost in tears and other people in the audience were almost in tears as well. And the cohesion of a community is really dependent on how vulnerable people are willing to go. And oftentimes it takes one person to kind of raise their hand and be courageous enough to be vulnerable. And that kind of sets the tone. And that's what Dan did. And that set the tone for all of our Mastermind Talks events. So I'm incredibly grateful for the guy, incredibly indebted to him, not only because of his support with MMT, but also even Mastermind Dinners. The book would not be around if it wasn't for Dan, because Dan actually approached me about it because we both held our own dinners. He does founders dinners, I do mastermind dinners. And at one point in time, he came to me and said, listen, we should write a book together on this, which is really like a playbook on how to do these dinners. And I said, that sounds fantastic. I mean, being able to collaborate with him on a project is a dream. So we ended up starting to kind of go through that process. And then kind of early on, I wanted to approach him to figure out the title of the book because I didn't want to call it Mastermind Dinners. I wanted to call it something neutral out of respect for him. And in that conversation, he said, you know what, listen, how about you run with the book? I'll support you 100% with it and it can be your thing. And I said, all right. So I ended up doing Mastermind Dinners, and Dan has been a huge supporter over the years with the book and the event and everything that I do. So I'm a huge fan of his. Dan grew and successfully exited 3 startups, 2 most recent one, Flowtown, Clarity FM. He's a mentor at 500 startups and Highline. He's also an advisor to companies like Hootsuite, an award-winning investor in over 30 startups under his belt, including Unbounce, Udemy, and Intercom. I can go on and on about his professional resume, but I can't say enough about him personally. He's one of my favorite people, which takes me to one of my other favorite people, Shaa Orwell, who is someone I actually connected with only about 2 years ago when he was nominated for MMT, but we've become super close. He's an entrepreneur with over 18 years of experience in a wide array of businesses in the online space, from digital currency, back in the day before crypto, to domains, to examine.com, which is an unbiased source on nutrition and supplements, which is really like his flagship business, I guess you could say, that garners millions of page views a month organically. Again, I respect both of these guys immensely when it comes to how they foster and nurture their relationships. And in this episode, the 3 of us discuss every detail you could think of when it comes to hosting a dinner, starting from best practices to inviting guests, whether to have seating arrangements or not, how to choose a stellar restaurant, strategies on kind of guiding deep conversations, and creating ultimately long-lasting relationships. A few housekeeping things, I guess you could say, before we get into this conversation. First is, we're going to highlight quite a few of the concepts that are covered in my book, Mastermind Dinners, Build Lifelong Relationships by Connecting Experts, Influencers, and Linchpins. It's important to note, again, that Dan was the one who helped me push this book across the finish line. And the book has sold surprisingly well. I mean, it has over 4.7 stars out of 5 on Amazon over the last 215 reviews. Now, if you're a member of the Community Made group, you can access a free PDF version of the book in the resource section. If you're not a member, lucky for you, joining is free. Simply visit communitymade.com to get access. Second, we're taking a lot of the principles shared in this season on how to grow, nurture, and amplify your business relationships and go deeper in a live, intimate workshop setting. To my surprise, that first workshop sold out, so we announced a second one. So for dates and availability on that, visit superconnectorworkshop.com. That's superconnectorworkshop.com. And third, if you're a fan of what we're doing here at Community Made, I would be forever grateful if you would share this podcast with a friend. I specifically avoided the traditional marketing methods of building an audience for the podcast because I don't care for vanity metrics. I don't want a lot of listeners. I want the right listeners. And I'm a firm believer that amazing people like yourself know other amazing people. So if you know someone who would benefit from an episode from one of our seasons, please send it along to them. Besides that, that's it. This is such a great, intimate conversation with two of my favorite people, so enjoy. So yeah, I have both of you guys here today to talk about or share some wisdom when it comes to relationships. There's a lot of people that get it wrong, and they focus on the, I guess, collection of contacts. They don't build any deep relationships whatsoever, and they do it in an authentic way. Both of you guys have your own kind of flavors to what you do, and the actual. But I didn't even put the two and two together. I mean, I did before, but just right now, Mastermind Dinners really was kickstarted by Dan, because Dan and I were going to work on a book. I don't know how that came to be, but we were going to work on a book.
I remember. You want me to tell you?
Sure, yeah.
So, I had written, people kept asking me about my founder dinners, and I was on a flight and literally wrote it on my iPhone in the Notes app, just I was sick of getting asked, so I just sat there in a 2.5 hour flight. I thumbed it out. I've never done it since. I haven't done it. Wouldn't do it again. But I thumbed out essentially what became an ebook. I copied and pasted into Google Docs, and then I would send that around. And you came out with an episode.
Yes.
On how you do it. And then I remember listening to it, and in there you mentioned the name, and I'm not going to say it unless you want to disclose the little present I got you. But I just thought, man, I should really do something with Jason, because we both share the same philosophy. So that's when I reached out, and then it quickly occurred to me that, you know what, this is Jason's book. There's Keith Ferazzi, who is the old school, and it's I feel your approach is so much more modern and, unique. So I was just do the book. And I think you took the podcast episode, transcribed it, edited it, added it, and that became the book.
Yeah. So I remember we were kind of going back and forth very early stage, and I was I want to be respectful of Dan, and I don't want to call it Mastermind Dinners, the way I do things. And, we were trying to come up with a name, and on that phone call, you're like, you know what, just you run with it, and I'll support you with it. And, if it wasn't for you, I would have never written that book whatsoever. So yeah.
So basically, Dan's been inspiring a lot of things. He has a agent kind of claim on everything you've done.
Community made. I wouldn't be where I am without him.
And I looked around the room last night, and even Archangel, and 80% of the people that I love at their core, and people that I've worked with to help me discover who I am, I met through MMT, Jason, and the people. So community made times 10.
Well, thank you. So I think that's all the context I guess we need. I do want to know, and I just kind of, I think that we were talking about this offline really quickly. When did you start your dinners? I was doing dinners. I kind of stumbled across it. You did dinners as well, but before me.
Yeah. So, my story started, so I read Keith Ferazzi's Never Eat Alone. And I will say the thing that I kind of started to do back then was inviting people for runs. So he talks about even workouts. You can do a group workout, and he talks about jazzercise or something. I was going to do that. A run. I remember starting it was maybe Loic Lemur, who's this French entrepreneur.
Le Web, is that what he is?
Yeah, he does Le Web, but this is 2008, and he just started this thing called Seismic, and he was doing runs on entrepreneurs, and I started doing it, and then I moved to San Francisco and got to know the community there, and then I kind of parlayed that into dinners. And really just because I didn't know anybody. I moved to San Francisco. I didn't have a high school friend, a cousin, nothing. Like I showed up there, got a studio apartment off Craigslist, and just started cold emailing founders and just bring them together to break bread. And I mean, we can talk about the impact, but I mean, it's been transformational. And what's neat when I think about it more so then than now, like I was there for 5 years, but probably for 3 years, every day I have an open standing lunch, and every entrepreneur, very proud to be Canadian. So he's on Twitter, whatever. So if you were a tech founder, pretty much from anywhere, but predominantly Canadian, going to San Francisco, I got the email and I would say, meet, and we'd go for this burrito place. And if you ask most tech people that met me in San Francisco, it was probably at a lunch with other, because like my whole thing was, I know you think I'm going to like sprinkle magic fairy dust on your success, but I know I'm not. But these other people that have emailed me probably are at the exact same journey. Like I'm there, and I'm like, we had raised money at that point, and they were visiting. So it's like a different context. So like, you know, it was like always at least 4, sometimes 8 founders, like myself and 7 other people. So that way they got to meet other people that were in town for like 3 days as well. And like the stories of those people that have gone on and like build companies together, refer investors. I mean, that was a neat part. And all I did was just like route, like inbound. What day of the week works best, and we'll all go out for some burritos.
So looking back, and I'll actually pose this to both of you, is there a specific kind of moment where you realized the importance of relationships and that it was something you want to kind of double down on? Because I had like a specific moment. Did either of you?
I'll let Saul. I don't know. I got to think about that one.
A specific moment, man. I wouldn't say it was a specific moment, but you just eventually realize that all the coolest people you know seem to know really other cool people. And it's not just one person randomly doing cool things. It's like a collective. And you kind of, when you ponder over that, you go, okay, that puts the onus on me to get to know other cool people, to get like to me, relationship has never been about business though, right? I've got it's interesting. We've all come from very different angles. Jason had done something and it didn't work out. He was getting into this and he just kind of threw himself at it, right? You were in so many different areas, right? For me, no one knew who the hell I was, but they knew of my company. Almost half the guys I've met in the entrepreneur space that are like, let's say, well-known or well-regarded, they knew of the company. They had no idea who I even was. And so for me, the relationships were more just about, hey, I want to have interesting conversations. I want to do interesting things. And who do I do interesting things with? It's with interesting people. And that was what kind of spurred me to go after relationships. But I never had that come to Jesus moment where I was like, oh, this is something. Even now, I don't think I still have that moment. To me, it's more just like, this enriches my life. It's a relationship, it's a vehicle or whatever. They're all part of that more, I don't know, interesting tapestry that you ideally can say, this is what I do with myself.
Got it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting as you ask that, like let's say the first moment where I realized like the quality of your relationship could add a lot of value to your life or like fix problems quickly. So like I hired a guy named Stu when I was 26. Company was doing about 1.2 million, and his job was literally he came from Bell Canada out of Ottawa, and I wanted to hire somebody to look at my business and like let me know like what if I built it right, or was I just like on crack, like what was I doing? And one of the first few projects we did together was renegotiating my banking relationships, like literally looking at the line of credit, the credit cards, all that fun stuff. And he's like, you are not getting treated right, blah, blah, blah. And we went through this competitive process, and he like flew to Moncton and worked with me. We went and visited the 5 major banks in the city. And he goes like, and what he taught me and he showed me was like, you can't just have like a corporate bank guy. Like, this is a person you need to like invite to your house for dinner, you know, offer to be helpful, give praise to in the press when you get mentioned. Like, he's like, Dan, when we close this deal and we're working on this other partnership, you got to mention them because that's the value. And I was just like, oh, like I came from a technical background, so it's more kind of like analytical.
Transactional.
And it's very transactional. Like, if this, then do that. And here all of a sudden he's showing me like, oh, at the end of the day, you know, if you're trying to scale a business, cash is king and cash flow matters. And if if you're not funded your bootstrap, lines of credits and access to capital is important. And you don't want to be a person that's managed in a spreadsheet. And that's what I was up to that point. All of a sudden now I built a relationship with the bank and started to get them know them. And they knew who I was and they actually knew what my business was about because I actually took the time. So like this is something today, like I just emailed my banker the other day because I was like, it's been 2 months. Like, hey, I'm downtown next week for a meeting. You mind if I stop by just to show you what I'm up to? Like now I wouldn't even think twice. Like, of course you need to do that. But I feel like outside even just business and friendships, like it's kind of like, the world runs on people and emotion, and it has nothing to do with like zeros and ones or logic. Sometimes it's literally like irrational emotion of just like, I just want to help this guy because he's a good dude, right? Like Kickstarters, like they're really supported because that story is really cool, and I just want to see him do well. There's no logic in like, I'll probably 80% chance I'll never see the product, but I don't care. So if you asked me to pick a moment, I would say it was through that process working with, this like business coach dude, Stu.
Well, you made me realize I have no relationship with any kind of bank or banker. So, although I focus a lot on relationships, that is something I've never actually. So I wrote that down right now. But,
must invite banker to your house. Yeah.
You started dinners relatively recently. You've done all kinds of stuff. You do the cookie off, which brings people together.
Yeah. A lot of humans together. I honestly don't remember when I first started doing it. I know why I started doing it. So just some background. I've been doing this entrepreneur stuff for 18 years. I was in virtual currency. I was in local
Which is
search.
hard to believe. He looks pretty young.
I was like, how are you? Are you like Ryan Holiday?
Grizzled white in my
The
beard.
headphones are covering up the gray beard.
All that white. But I was, local search, domain names, daily deals, article development, blogs, all that kind of stuff. And one of the things I've personally found for myself that was awesome is that because I've been in so many different niches, I've been exposed to a ton of humans I would have never normally been exposed to. Especially, and I don't want to pigeonhole us, but a lot of the people we know or we may be associated with come from the realm of internet marketing, which is both genius and psychology and all that kind of stuff. But the cross-pollination, I always said bubbles. We're always stuck in our little bubbles, and I'm still in cross-pollination from Michael Roderick, is that we don't get exposed to what everyone else is doing. SEO guys know all the SEO guys. Internet marketing knows all the internet marketing guys. So for me, it was really just, hey, if I bring other humans together, whatever bizarre conversation they may have, I can just sit there and let them go at it. And so originally it was never dinners, right? It was just, hey, let's go grab a cookie. So this is one of the things I'm going to mention. I'm sure you guys have come across this. And anyone listening can learn from this. The worst thing you can ever do is someone you don't really know, cold emails. Don't say, hey, can I pick your brain? Don't say, let's go grab a coffee.
No, they don't need their brain picked.
No, exactly. I'm going to sound like a complete asshole, but I'm like, but why? Like, whatever am I going to do with this? So inadvertently, I had stumbled upon this where when I'd email people or I contact them about hanging out, I say, I'm going to bribe you. And I said this, I'm going to bribe you with the best damn chocolate chip cookie you've ever had. And so that was always like interesting. Let's do this. And so eventually I accidentally stumbled on this, is I started overlapping people. So I might say, hey, let's go hang out at 12. By the way, at 12:30, my friend Jason's going to come. You can hang out. All three of us can hang out. He's in something totally different than you. You're in something totally different, but we'll have an interesting conversation.
You would disclose the overlap before.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, cool.
100%. So there would be no like, oh, this guy's an asshole. He only put aside 20 minutes for me or 40 minutes for me or whatever, and someone else is coming in. And so the other also nice benefit was if Jason's a little bit late or whatever, no big deal. We're still having a conversation.
Were you eating a lot of cookies, man?
What's that?
Were you doing
I've become really good at like pushing it on other people. I've become fantastic at having my one.
Holy shit, you stack 6 meetings. That's 6 cookies.
And be like, all right, guys, you guys, or like I'll pre-purchase half a dozen and they'll just bring out one whenever the next person comes. So it's not like sitting there calling out my name or our name. And so that's kind of how I originally almost stumbled upon it. And then the dinners almost became like, okay, cookies are nice, but we can't do a lot of people. We do maybe 4 people max, especially with the overlap concept. And the other thing is I love food. I think Jason can attest for this. I know a lot of chefs here. I love interesting food experiences. So it almost became a marriage of 2 different interests. Hey, we'll go have really good and interesting food, and we'll bring in interesting human beings, and all of us will have conversations. It's come a long way, and going to other people's dinners has been fantastic. I try to at least steal almost an idea from someone's dinner, how they structure it, what they do pre, post, intra, stuff like that. And they've kind of evolved from there. So that's kind of how I got into this entire realm of doing dinners.
That's actually a cool thing to kind of talk about because like you don't have to do dinners. Like that is unique to you, right? No. Like the cookie often you did the sausage fest.
The sausage showdown.
Sausage showdown.
Because I knew the sausage fest, sausage off, sausage party, innuendo jokes would fly, so I went with the alliteration tactic instead.
So, I mean, if you think about it, like you can do podcast interviews, you could do an event, have speakers. I mean, there's so many really interesting ways to get connected with notable people, add value to their lives that just has this kind of rub-off effect.
Podcasting is a great method. I mean, that's not the reason I'm doing the podcast, and obviously it's getting a lot noisier now for that kind of stuff. But to sit down with somebody for an hour that you admire and like go deep with them when there's like no interruptions, I mean, that's priceless. You know what I mean? Like, so as a relationship building tool, it's a phenomenal thing. And to what you said, doing events is another one. I mean, I still consider myself a nobody, but especially back in 2013, like. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody cared who I was. But, seeing me associated with you and Tim Ferriss and Mark Echo and, Mike McDermott, who I adore. And, over the years, we've had more and more events. I mean, that credibility rubs off on you on some level. So, those are some ways. But I mean, again, to what Saul says, like a lot of people reach out to me and they're like, well, does it have to be dinners? Could it be lunches? I'm like, dude, it could be lunches. Breakfast could be.
I would say 70% of my stuff is lunch.
And this is actually interesting because Saul and I let's talk about best practices around these things because I've never really done a lunch. I've always done dinners. Always done dinners.
Me too.
So I'd love and Saul actually brought this on my radar again recently. We had a call with Derek Coburn. His cadre stuff is all lunches, all lunch based. And so you can chime in on what he said his reasonings for that was. But for you personally, why I didn't know 70% were lunches. That I didn't know. So did you focus on dinners initially and then realize the value of doing lunches instead?
I mean, I guess I want to say a few things. Like, when you asked about the value of relationships, it's like, I've been fortunate enough, Mark Cuban invested in my last company, Clarity. That was 100% byproduct of somebody I met at a founder's dinner. The story of people always like, how did you get to spend a week with Richard Branson? Like literally you couldn't make this stuff up. 4 years prior, guy from New York's coming to San Francisco. I was doing these dinners. Somebody said, hey, you should meet this guy, Dan. He knows a lot of people just because he does. And he ended up meeting his co-founder. They started a business and their business partnered with Virgin. And Richard said, hey, I want to meet people that are helping entrepreneurs. And 4 years later, cold email, Dan, would you want to, and I thought he was punking me. Like I literally, it was like May, or it was, I think we did in April, and I thought this can't be real. So like, but I guess that everybody, like, there's no reason we do that. Like literally I do it selfishly because I'm fascinated. I'm like, at the end of the day, I get a high off of seeing people tell me about the things that they love to do and create. And that's just me. And maybe that's not for everybody, but like, I just have an addiction to being around people that are passionate about what they're creating in the world, period. That's the best thing I could say. In regards to like lunch versus dinner, initially, I think it was just a byproduct of scheduling, right? Like the lunches were easy for me to schedule since the volume was there, right? And like usually with San Francisco, like you pretty much work all night. Like, I mean, I was, in my 20s, late 20s. So it was like I was working most nights. The only window I really had was lunch. It was a nice breakup of the day. And then then the kids came along about 5 years ago. So like dinners are actually, unless I'm traveling, I never do a night dinner because I have the kids. So the lunches, but the cool part of lunches, I host quite a few of them at my house. Like every 2 weeks I do them at my house. So I've always said, I still remember this. When I first moved to San Francisco, I cold emailed a guy that was super notable. Got in a lot of trouble recently in the press named Dave McClure. So shout out to Dave. It's kind of shitty, but it is what it is. And this is before all the stuff, 500 stars and stuff. And he offered to let me stay at his house. He's like, hey, do you need a place to stay? And I just thought, like, I don't know. That's the cool, like, for somebody to open up their home to technically a stranger. We never met in person at that point. We talked about 3 times on the phone. I always thought, like, when I get settled in San Francisco, I'm going to start doing things at my house. You just reminded me of something pretty neat. Because I don't think there's a way that you can honor somebody's relationship more than opening up your home.
Yeah.
So I started hosting these Canadians in the Valley dinners in my condo in San Francisco, and that's how I met Ryan Holmes, which turned into me being a formal advisor of a $1.3 billion company. And he can disclose the number, but it's millions of dollars of value. Like what So if anybody's listening to that, like you just reminded me about the house, and I was like, oh yeah, I used to do the dinners at my house and just invite a bunch of Canadians, and it's neat because like the CTO of Google is a Canadian. There's and so I have some thoughts around like structure and themes and all that stuff. But lunch for me was just if you live in the suburbs and you work downtown and you're trying to get connected with notable people, they're usually downtown at lunch, so it's a little bit easier logistically. But I will say in regards to deeper, because usually the problem with lunch, like I just had one for lunch, is that kind of after an hour, everybody's got to dissipate. Yeah. Whereas, with a dinner, it can go 4 or 5 hours, right? And I think that's when the real relationships can be deepened. You know what? I want to start talking about how you guys curate for the meals, the dinners. Because it sounds like your approach, Saul, is more like kind of broad to see what happens. Mine, I definitely focus on themes and structure around like types of size of businesses to provide color. I'm just curious, like, Jason, how do you do your meals? Like when you cold outreach to those 30 people in New York, what was the thought behind those people, and how did you decide who to invite?
Well, I can think the strong commonality that they all share is I'd have dinner with them all individually on some level. Like I find them fascinating enough that I'd have dinner with them. And then, especially if it's a large dinner like that, I don't have to worry that they're the same across the board because I do assigned seating. That's one thing I do with my dinners as well. That's kind of rather different. But I've done different themes of dinners for different things. Like I've had a friend, for example, that who was struggling to build an advisory board. So I did a dinner around him where I invited 3 other friends of mine who have advisory boards, and he didn't know it or whatever, but I knew he'd get great value. And I also steered the conversation around like, oh, so, tell us about your advisory boards type thing. So, I've done dinners to support other people. I've done dinners because I'm fascinated about a topic, and, the whole, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I mean, there's some dinners I've done. I did one actually in Vancouver with like a slew of like ridiculously the most successful tech people in Vancouver in January. And I'm like, A, I'm not in tech, and B, these guys are just in a different lane. But
they're like almost hippie-ish, eh? Did you notice that?
Very interesting.
Yeah, was Rick there from Unbounce?
No, I didn't have Rick there.
Oh, dude, big beard, Ryan, yeah. The Vancouver tech founders are pretty.
It's an interesting crew, but I mean, sometimes I'll do a dinner, and I never make the dinners about me. I make it about like them. I'm doing a bunch of tech guys in Vancouver. Do you guys want to come out? Blah blah blah. And then oftentimes when they get there and they're like, oh, I know you, and it's been a while since we've seen each other and that kind of stuff. So I'll do them like that.
That part I feel is harder from what you do, which I love, is the name tags. Because if you don't understand their relationships, it's hard for me, anyways, to like put them at the right seat.
Yeah, well, I do. I know a lot of the people firsthand. That's an advantage. 2, I'll do a lot of research, and then 3, now I just started probably the last 5 or 6 dinners implementing intake forms where they have 9 questions that they have to fill out, which includes like your dietary restriction.
I forgot you did one for last night.
Yeah, right. So you got your name, cell phone number, because I might need that because I usually try to send a text the day of, and then dietary restrictions. And then
what do you need most of 3? I think you said
what are 3 things you'd like to be doing in 3 years? If we were to meet with a bottle of champagne this time next year, what are we celebrating? There's like 3 or 4 questions like that, and I can start to like, if I don't know them all that well, I can usually kind of
Dude, it'd be neat together. Just as like a little aside to grab that info in a year and email it back to me, because I forget what I wrote.
Yeah, and it's
just be like, how'd you do? Like, man, this guy's thoughtful.
So that's actually,
and or us.
And or creepy.
I've integrated, which was asking that question and then capturing it, and then I have it actually in my CRM system, and then I have to follow up a year from today and try to figure out on my own organically if they achieved it or not, and if they did, actually send them a bottle of champagne.
That's next level.
So, how many people fill it out? Everyone fills it out, no problem?
Yeah. So the dinner I did last night, I knew everybody well, and I've been overwhelmed as of late, so I wasn't on top of everybody. But
I filled it out, man.
You did.
I did too.
Yeah, I mean,
I
didn't even show up and I filled it out.
but
I'm mad at whoever didn't fill it out.
But I didn't have like
busy.
normally I'll have my sister Rachel go through it and make sure
like,
everybody
ping.
did it and ping them like a couple days prior and all that kind of stuff. Like I actually have like a it depends on the dinner, but like the one I did in Waterloo, for example, was a completely new market for me. Nobody knew who I was, all that kind of stuff. So I really had like this tight system, like
And I will nuance is you put invite only in the subject line, which is smart because I've had issues where people just. I was with my friends from college, and I thought I'd bring them with me. I'm like, oh, geez, that's great.
Yeah.
That just changed.
Really? I've never had that.
Oh, if you do enough, like it's a numbers game, it'll happen.
They
Just
show up
randos.
and they bring their spouse, and you're like,
or it's like somebody they hadn't seen in a while, and they saw them at a conference. So then the whole meal, they're talking to that person, and they're not engaged in
the vibe. Yeah.
There's also there's that nice exclusivity / significance feel that it's like it's
Totally.
This is exclusive.
Yeah, so I'm definitely stealing that. I think that was a really good takeaway from.
So I do the intake forums. I already know a lot of the people, so I don't do as much cold outreach as you do.
Yeah.
I capture a lot of cold people. Like I'm like, oh, this guy's interesting, and he's based in LA, so I'll tag him in my CRM as like this guy's in LA, and then I'll have that tag, so that if I'm in LA, I'll hopefully deepen that relationship.
Yeah.
So there's a few different ways I do it that way. But you don't do it like I'm the only one of the few that actually. I don't know anybody else does assigned seating actually. So
I tried it a few times.
Oh, have you really?
I did try it a few times. I eventually gave up on it because, again, if my idea was to have like almost like an ad hoc situation, my instead situation, and you went through this, I just kick people out of their chairs and make them go somewhere else. So one of the things I found that made it easier for meals, and this is not always possible, is to do prefix menus. So it's not like this person at this seat has ordered this. If everyone's sharing the same food, it's so much easier to be like, you get up, go over there. You get up, you go over there. And some of it's not even, some of it is, hey, I think you really need to talk to X person or Y person. Some of it is just this area is really loud, this area is a little bit quieter, or people aren't, there's different personalities.
Totally.
Like, oh, let's get someone who's a lot more engaging or facilitating.
Somebody needs to maintain the conversation there. So, like,
Exactly.
my style is simple. I just did it at lunch, right? So you have like 8 people. I also think it's important, like, if you had 6, I always call it holding court. So, like, my job is a conversation router. Now, I think that's actually a benefit of doing a meal is you do not have to hold the convo. So a lot of the introverts on the, listening, like, you're better off doing that than a one-off coffee because then you don't have to. You can actually like sit back and let the loudmouth guy like me keep talking, and and then everything's going. And you're just like, and then everybody leaves super pumped and thanks you. It's and then you're like,
that was a nervous
no
wreck.
problem.
I mean, I'm still a nervous wreck when I do dinners. I mean, last night was an exception because I knew everybody. Like, those are all like some of my closest friends, but when I do dinners like in a new market where I don't know people, I show up an hour and a half before.
Just make sure they walk away going, that was time well spent.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, so what I do is I sit in the middle. So like, let's call it 6 chairs. I would sit on one side, usually the back facing the thing, and sit in the center, and then let people kind of naturally. So I don't do assigned seating, but I will if I feel like if I have like a Clay Bear or yourself, and I feel like they've been to many. Because that's the other thing I love doing is so that's another trick. I co-host a lot of dinners.
That's one thing you do. I don't.
Yes, I co-host, and the reason why is I'm lazy, and so they're responsible for half, and they give me the recommendation for the restaurant.
Yeah.
So technically, I just co-hosted with Nicholas Kusmich. Thanks, Nick. He just didn't know it because he helped me figure out the place. Because I just, if you don't know the city, the last thing you want to do is get some janky restaurant. So then as they're sitting down, if I feel like I know people they need to meet, I'll do that. Now, I used to organize these dinners called Founders for Funders, Funding for Founders in San Francisco, which inspired recently, I think 2 years ago, I told you the story about the Great Atlantic Canadian Kitchen Party I held in Moncton. And that's where I met all these guys like Martin Latulip and I do tables of 8, and I do two elders. We call them elders, essentially like seasoned entrepreneurs, 2 pros, and 4 rookies. So the ratio is like 4 beginners, 2 people a little further, like let's call it 5 years in, and then people it's just like 20 plus years.
Yeah.
And so I do assign seating and group them in tables of 8. But that was like I cold called 178 entrepreneurs in my town of 100,000 people, and through those calls, decided the 80 people, that the one I flew Shaa in to speak at that dinner, and then I curated from that. So, and it's a lot of work. Like curating, people understand. Like when I was doing the Finance for Founders dinners in San Francisco, it was 150 people, and I would spend a full 8 hours moving people around tables to make sure that they were meeting new people and the right people. And I don't know how you do how much time do you spend mastermind talks when
the assigned seating?
Oh,
it takes me about.
Well, you have dude. I wasn't smart enough to do your friggin' word cloud stuff and all that, like check boxes. I'm like, oh my god.
Pause. What's this word cloud?
Oh, it's next level
going on.
Yeah, I mean, I actually the last event,
the mind map thing.
Yeah. Well, that's
so cool.
The last event that I did was the first event where I actually had a system. Historically, it'd be like I'd hit it out of the park with certain ones.
Yeah.
But other ones, I want to ensure like people don't sit next to the same person twice. And when you're doing 6 seatings and 150 people, that's going to happen quite a bit. So I don't have the system, off the top of my head, but
I'll explain what I saw.
Yeah,
I mean, essentially, what he does is everybody answers questions on like, what are things you need out of this? What are some of your business wins? Blah blah blah. So then he's got like I think a list of like who you are, where you're from, what's your business, and the answer to those things. And you take every one of the things like somebody needs. Like, let's say I need to find a chef to make me cookies. You put it in the word and in the mind map for everybody. But what was neat is you made the bubbles of the mind maps check boxes, which I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah. So what I would do is I had a mind map for every seating, and I'd have everybody's name in every single mind map. And I would say, I want to, and I'd read through everybody's intake forms, and the intake forms are historically about 160,000 words every year. So you go through all these intake forms. While I go through it, I'll be like, Saul is, a ninja when it comes to SEO. And do the examples from do you remember when you're like, for an example, you may not know why you're sitting, and he did the whole row.
Dude, I remember that.
Oh my gosh. It was like watching Rain Man. It was like, I'm not worried. I was like, how did you do that?
Well,
I thought for sure you prepped, but you just did it.
No, that's no.
It's like you're sitting next to this person because you like golf, and this person's dad won the LPGA tour, and you need to talk to somebody in finance.
Which would be amazing, by the way, if a dad won an LPGA tour, but we're just going to let that.
That's how much I know about golf.
For a split second.
Jason didn't even know. He's like, why is that weird?
I wasn't going to call it out. But
you knew.
I know enough about golf to know that LPGA is not what his father should be playing.
Yeah, no.
Nope.
But yeah, no, I mean, yeah. So I'll connect people. The stronger the uncommon commonality, the stronger the bond. That's at its core.
Dude, you should unpack that for people.
So basically, if I walk outside today and meet 1,000 people, statistically, I forget what it is offhand, but maybe 50 of them, maybe less, but let's say 50 of them are entrepreneurs. So if I'm at a dinner or an event with 50 entrepreneurs, that's a strong uncommon commonality. I'll get along with those people most likely, more so than if I just met anybody or everybody. With that said, though, if I have a 8-figure business, that's maybe represents like 0.4% of entrepreneurs. So to be in a room with other people with 8-figure businesses, that's a stronger uncommon commonality. I most likely will hit it off stronger.
Got it. I never really understood that. So uncommon meaning that the thing that you know about her, it's very unique in the broad spectrum of 1,000 people.
Yeah.
So if I love a certain.
You love cookies, like you and Saul most likely will connect over cookies, amongst other things, quite possibly, right?
Got it.
The stronger,
or you're from the same city.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the more unique
while you're Canadian traveling in Europe,
if you're Canadian,
as a percentage,
you'll connect. If you're both from Toronto, you'll connect. If you're both from the same neighborhood.
That's it. You guys are hanging out the rest of your trip. What time are you going to the pool tomorrow?
Yeah. So you're looking for like those type of things.
Oh, I thought it was just like these like obscure things that you have in common, but it's really not even just about that.
Well, the more obscure you get, the type of that relationship will be, or the more rapport there will be, and the quicker that relationship will form. So the example with Mastermind Talks was like these 2 guys wanted to bring their fathers to the Masters.
That's what
and the guy next to him just did a trip to the Masters last year and is doing a trip the following year. And then there was
but just like you did that on so many levels for a room of 150 people. But
that's the way we do it. Dude, I just went through the feedback this morning for last year, our event in May. There's so much we can improve and so much we can double down on. Like I have so many ideas for next year.
Well, I
This
think
is why I stick to charity food offs. Let him deal with
No,
it.
it's overwhelming
interesting.
because
No.
I'm like, there's no way
I can top that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I think for
God.
people listening, like they got to understand, like if you just do nothing more than just email 2 people and get together for 3 people to like go for a walk, that's like step 1.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing too. So a couple things. I mean, one is I want to say like the assigned seating, like don't overdo it. Like assigned seating is of value when you're doing large dinners, when the like conversations can be fragmented. Like if some guys,
But let's talk about the large, because I have a thing about six people,
is great.
1 conversation.
Yeah.
8 people, 2 conversations.
yeah, well, so I'm not a fan of doing big dinners at all.
In regards to going deep, right? Like that's my
You
whole
don't
thing.
go deep, right?
Yeah.
Last night we did dinner 30 people. It was loud.
Yeah.
It was loud in there. You had like
I couldn't have a conversation across the table. And then there's also the table depth. These are weird things that if you
Ooh,
organize.
table depth is
Table depth's huge.
And chairs. If they're like the cushiony chairs you kind of
Okay.
fall into.
Oh, interesting.
Then
Yeah.
you can't really.
Yeah.
So I'm not a big fan.
headaches.
So what I do, like the reason I do large dinners like that, I mean, last night was kind of an exception just because so many people were in town and all that kind of stuff. But generally, like when I went to Denver, I did a 30-person dinner, and the focus around that is twofold. One is I can have these micro interactions with people, and usually can get a good handle on them really quickly if I want to go deeper in that relationship.
Got it.
So I may have met them online, blah blah
Somewhat
blah.
broad, big dinner.
Exactly. And then I'll in a few seconds I'll be like, I want to go deeper with this guy. So the next time I come to Denver, I'll just do maybe a dinner 6, or I'll just do dinner or lunch with him, or coffee with him, or call
Dude,
with
the
him.
funny part is I'll be honest, I don't do one-on-one anymore. It's so weird.
I'm
I just do my overlap on, but I only do them on Fridays. That's what I've done.
I guess
now.
I'm just so excited for people to meet
Only
each other.
Fridays.
I would never want to do that to them.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't know. I'm at a point, like I always say, that the key to a strong network, at least at this point for me, is like subtraction and not addition.
For
sure.
And it's going deep with the relationships I have
100%.
now.
Yeah.
Like I had dinner with Trivinia 2 nights ago.
Yeah, I know. When
And-
you said that, I was
Dude,
like,
I was
wow,
like,
I
yeah,
don't do that.
it
I
was
don't
so
know.
good.
I feel like I might have went too far.
It was
like
so,
I'm
but
too
you're
far
also
in
your
the group.
personality is different. There's no right or wrong.
But I do a
answer.
lot of one-on-one, like calls. Like that's
Yeah.
the funny part is like I'll do a lot of one-on-one calls.
Yeah.
But when it's in person, I just feel like if I'm in a city where they're at, like I want them to
those.
meet somebody else. Like
Yeah.
I just feel like it's my gift.
So those big dinners. I mean, again, there's a reason I do them, and I rarely do them. The most valuable, and the thing is, also to what you said, I was the facilitator. I got no value in the sense of like I didn't get to know anybody at last night dinner. I didn't get to deepen any of those relationships. I was facilitating the entire time, making sure like food was coming out, everything was on time, all that kind of stuff.
which people don't appreciate is a lot harder than one would think to do it well. Facilitating takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. And I don't want to make it sound like almost like a martyr here, but it's very selfless that you're so busy worrying about everyone else that you don't really get to fully do what you
No,
want.
if you're lucky, you get to eat because you might forget.
Yes.
to.
I actually didn't have a seat last night, and then one guy canceled last minute. So I'm like, I have a seat.
Isn't that
That's
funny?
great.
Like,
I
yeah.
wasn't gonna.
Was that
I wasn't
me?
gonna
Did
eat.
my
No,
cancellation?
it was somebody
Oh,
else. But
I-
for me, dinners of 6,
Yeah.
groups of 6.
See, I will
at
say,
most
I just
is
want to say,
best.
if you're trying to do it to build relationships with people, 6 gets the 1 convo.
Yeah.
And as soon as you go to 8, there's 2.
Yeah. And the problem is one of the problems with groups of 8 or more, too, is that not only is there 2 conversations, which, especially if you have a bunch of ADD entrepreneurs, I'm overhearing the other conversation, and I may have FOMO that, like, shit, I actually want to, like, jump in on
that's
that.
the worst. I've had people do that, like literally get up from one side of the table and
Really?
like go and sit on the end of another table because they just didn't want to be part. And I feel bad for the people that were in
Yeah.
that foursome.
You can't go wrong with those smaller, more intimate
No,
dinners.
no.
So like groups of 6 are smaller.
Yeah.
1 conversation
Yeah.
is gold. Like 6 is an ideal number too, because if you lose 1 from a cancellation, then you still have 5, and it's a great number. If you do like 4 and lose 1 from a cancellation, then you have 3 people. That's an awkward number.
Yeah.
So so I want to kind of talk. I want to kind of share that, and then also the table of 6, and then. The first dinner for me is like the most heavy lifting because now we were all in groove and we have these great kind of networks and peer groups. But I had to do a dinner almost from scratch in Kitchener-Waterloo in July. And
in that barn or something, right? That was pretty
So
beautiful, by
we
the
had
way.
20 people at that dinner. And getting back to like your personal brand, like these were like the biggest movers and shakers in the city, which I was incredibly grateful they agreed.
And were
Because
these
I
all
think that's
cold,
cool.
or were you warmly introduced to them?
They were all. It was beautiful because for me, I was like, I'm not known at all in Kitchener-Waterloo, so this is almost me putting myself back in my
Right,
shoes back
going
in the
back to
day.
that
But
grind.
now I know how to do these dinners, and I learned a lot of stuff doing from them. And one of them was that the importance of like. identifying connectors in the community and getting them to do like similar what you do, like
dude,
partnering.
that's the co-host.
Dude,
like,
yeah.
Finding like that is the game changer.
There's a few people that know.
There's
everybody.
literally like you could probably look at any network, and I got this, dude. It just like side like as a now that you made me think about it, book Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell taught me the concept of the connector, and I was lucky like. There's a handful of people I got built. Oh, you want to know the secret to the connectors? It's obvious because we're sitting in front of one.
I'm ready.
Event organizers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I moved to San Francisco. I made friends with the 3 event organizers that ran all the 3 events. And you know what I offered them to add value to their lives? Let me recruit speakers for you. I had the benefit of not having to do an event, but be able to reach out, add value to the speaker, play liaison. And that's what I did. That's how I got the 150 people to show up for my Finance for Founders dinners, was leveraging the event organizers, offering to help them with speaker recruiting, cold emailing all these notable speakers.
That is brilliant. Brilliant.
If you read Tipping Point, that's what he talks. He's like, you got to figure out who at the network. If you just ask people like, who would you turn to for this kind of advice? If the name keeps coming up, that's the guy.
That's somewhat similar to Tim Ferriss, where he used to volunteer at tech events in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And that's how he met Jack Canfield, because he became like a normal volunteer, and then he moved into the role of selecting speakers, and he would start selecting speakers that were on some level beneficial to him as well. So that's how he connected with Jack Canfield. Jack Canfield is one who told him to write the book and introduced him to his agent.
I didn't know that story.
Steve Hanselman, yeah. And then it got rejected by a bunch of publishers. Obviously, then it finally got a publisher. The 28th time it got a publisher. And then huge success. But that was through events as well.
I'm telling you, like, I think people, no matter what city you're in, there's an event organizer that's kind of like, responsible for the big events. And if you can add value to their lives, even just volunteering at the front desk, you'll get to meet people. And when you're ready to do a dinner, they're a great kind of reference source.
And something I want to loop on this, and I want to loop back actually on something that made me think of what Saul said. Again, getting back to the heavy lifting of the first dinner. Once you do that first dinner, and if you're looking at just a market, like I want to go deep in like the Toronto community or that kind of stuff, to what Saul said earlier, amazing people know other amazing people. And I had to do a lot of cold outreach for that first dinner. We had 20 people, but they nominated another 48 people for the following dinner. Oof. And we have this like nomination process to be considered for future dinners.
Interesting.
So they just, our list of people has kind of grown exponentially.
One of the last dinners I did was at the RCMI, but in their library room. And one of the women who's there, she's done very well for herself and whatnot, but she was like, I always knew that there'd be like these fancy dinners in these like secret library rooms, and now I know I've made it. And that kind of really hit me that it's not even just about the food, but that feeling of exclusivity. So now I've even more become more aware of, I need to find locations in Toronto or wherever I am that are so unique and interesting that it's not even just necessarily
a restaurant that they could have gone to.
Yes, it's like,
dude,
I would have...
Again, next level.
Like the place that I have, it's in the Royal Canadian Military Institute. It's not available normally, right?
How'd you get it?
I knew some caterer or something, I think, and then I was in some Facebook group through her, and I posted about, hey, I'm looking for the special thing, and the woman in charge of catering there saw me and messaged me on Facebook being like, we can do this.
Okay, so who is she? Because I think there's a pattern there. What was she? What role? She was a caterer?
She was a head caterer, yeah. But this is like a private Facebook group.
No, but I think like if I wanted to find those places in my city, I would figure out the catering company.
Yeah.
They would know.
Find where the community of chefs, find where they hang out. And it was that private community that I posted it in. That's how I found her.
Man, that's if I ever post a picture of like a cool venue, you'll now know where that came from.
Yeah, actually, the cater idea, that's we use that for our last Mastermind Talks event. We asked cater, what's one of the best properties you've ever
Yeah, you don't ask the venue.
No, yeah.
Well, we have this corner area over here. It's like, stop
the
trying to sell me your spots.
But like that uniqueness really sets it apart.
That literally is probably a third, of the value you can bring is the location and venue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say third.
That basement one we did when Neil Patel came in town, same thing. Like
I've used that since. It's
I
such a great
love that
space.
spot. I know the owner really well. It was actually his wife that I had the argument over the cookies that started this entire cookie life thing. But it's basement. It's this beautiful live edge table. There's like the salami and cheese on display. There's no signal downstairs.
Yeah. Perfect.
So we're just in our own little bubble. That's it. We have one server comes from the side. No one's ever bothering. No
What's
one's
your
coming
guys'
through for
thoughts on the
bathroom or
same
anything.
venue, though, to build rapport with the staff and you're kind of a known... Because, I got that from Keith's book. He talks about, like, picking the same restaurant, and I found, like, it's kind of fun to, have the owner or the chef come out to the table.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of value. And you bring a lot of economic value. So, like, I always do my lunches downtown when I do my downtown and back home at the same restaurant. And, like, the owner... like really appreciates it. One time I was having a meal with like 6 really cool, notable entrepreneurs, and he just happened to say, like, he came over and said, "Dan, today's on me, thank you." And I look like such a baller.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I was like,
oh man.
I was like, oh, thanks, Jim. And they're like, wow, does he do this all that? I'm like, I might come here from time to time. And I was like, yeah,
reputation.
So I think that's
I think having a few spots is key.
Yeah, your
having that
go-tos
relationship.
and make the time. This is a funny story. So I always cater at my house. This guy, Shaa, who's like a chef in the city, and he caters a few of my parties. And the other day, I was doing a themed lunch around local restaurateurs and retailers, so retailer restaurateurs. And I emailed him about the lunch, and he goes, "Let me check my schedule and see if the staff's available to do the lunch." And I go, "No, Pierre, I want you to come as a guest." So inviting the owner of the restaurant.
For sure.
Getting back to what you said about like cross pollination, I think that's important. Because again, we get stuck in our own bubbles. Because similar to that, I wanted to kind of get plugged in to the restaurant scene in Toronto, and I brought in like Shep for a Q&A, and I didn't post it out to Mastermind Talks. I reached out to all these chefs because I had a reason to reach out to these restaurant owners and be like, hey, like
that's kind of awesome. If you're a chef and you get a guy saying, "Do you want to meet Shep?"
Yeah.
Like,
it worked
you've
out.
got a secret.
It worked out well. Still, it was a little bit of an uphill battle.
Was it?
Believe it or not, yeah. I mean, there was.
That to me is called natural selection.
To get a chef to come out on an evening.
Oh, that's
during
almost
the
Chefs
week.
impossible.
they also get inundated with requests nonstop.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
So like Rocco, he's like, I get at least 1 or 2 invites a day.
Yeah.
Like, how do I choose what to do with my time?
Yeah.
Even like the cookie off, I had it in January middle of January. I have to moving it to the end of January because the busiest time is from Thanksgiving till Valentine's.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them take vacation for the first 2-3 weeks of January. So there was about a half a dozen bakers who couldn't make it because they're on vacation.
Of timing.
Yeah. So usually Sunday is great, Monday is great.
I'd say
but
lunchtime is probably good.
That's the other
Sunday
one.
lunch,
Lunchtime usually, or you do a little bit later of a lunch, so the rushes all die down.
Yeah, like
at
at 2
2 p.m.
Yeah.
Done. Perfect.
Yeah, but I mean, again, what I think all three of us share in common is we explore other communities.
Oh, for sure.
We're not just only in the entrepreneur community.
No. I mean, to me, my fascination is actually other. I've learned, like, software is my primary thing, but all my great ideas have come from other industries. Like, I'm weird like that. Like, I read books on like airline industries and self-storage.
Those are way more fun.
Yeah,
kidding me?
I'm looking for the patterns.
Business books are so boring.
That being said, I don't know if you do the broad spectrum. Like, every meal I have are typically thematic. So I've done like, marketplace founder meals, B2B SaaS lunch today, or mobile apps or marketing products. Like, I definitely try to figure out like what's the theme, and then bring people that don't know each other in the industry. Because if I don't have a chef, like if I don't like, I think you talk about it like an anchor tenant for the meal, right?
Yeah.
So if you've never heard that concept, it's just like having somebody notable or an anchor to kind of draw the other ones helps. In lieu of that, the theme can be the anchor tenant.
Yeah.
In my experience,
I don't do that, and I'm not saying. And I think in terms of like the anchor tenant, I think part of what happens is as your reputation grows, that you're bringing other people together, it becomes easier to draw people in. Where they're like last dinner I did, maybe half a dozen were like best dinner ever. And I literally don't know if I did anything different. Maybe the location was really nice, but I think it was their comfort level and that they were expecting, I'm not going to know 90% of the people there. So we'll do introductions. He'll make us feel weird a little bit or whatever, but then we're going to go at it. So that's my approach. I think you can be the anchor yourself.
Yeah.
Once you've got that.
Once you build that reputation, for sure.
Then it's Mastermind Talks. I don't know what the hell's going on there, but okay, I'll buy a ticket. We'll find out. That reputation, I think, is so important, and a lot of people see the dinners and they try to skip that part, but it's like, no. I built these relationships. People got to know me. They knew that even if I showed up and it was a bit awkward, a bit weird, the person was trying, not being like, whatever, I'm so cool, I'm going to bring in a dozen, whatever individuals together and look how great it's going to be. Yeah. I think that's really.
Let's
really
talk intros, because you brought that up, and I find that's a fast. Yeah, like how do you guys handle it? Because Jason did something last night I don't think I ever saw him do in a while.
Oh, interest at the dinner. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's hear Jason's. Yeah. Well, because him and I were.
There's different ways to do it, right?
Different approaches.
I thought you meant Darryl Coburn made a post about people like.
The blind intros.
I thought we were going that route.
And then Aspley just wrote the longest comment on that.
Let's not sidetrack. We could definitely talk about that, but I'm talking about at the dinner.
There's definitely different approaches as far.
And let's talk even before or after and during, because I think there's a few things you can do there too, right?
So what does it look like before?
Yeah. What do you do? Do you send an email to everybody an hour before, letting them know who's going to be there? Do you do hide the attendee list on the calendar invite? Because I do that.
Yes.
So, I don't like when people cherry pick.
Use the Waterloo dinner as an example. Reach out to these people cold. Realize there's a few connectors in the community, and reach out to them, and I got their recommendations on a few people. So that's how I got my first kind of baseline list. Those who said that they couldn't come to this dinner because of scheduling, I kept them on the list for the following dinner. So that when this dinner was all said and done, I had a list of like 50, 60 people for the next one.
Whoa.
So, and it just snowballs from there.
That's from one dinner.
Yeah, because
I have a hit list of 50.
Because what I would do is I asked the first people, I sent out like 40 invitations for 20 spots. The 20, let's say, take them. 20 don't. So that 20 gets moved on to the next dinner as a possible people for the list. The 20 who accepted, I say, should a spot come available for the dinner, do you know anybody else?
Good way to do it.
A fascinating individual.
Should a spot.
Yeah. So then maybe like 10 of those people will recommend. So that brings my list to 30. Now, once the dinner is successful, at the end, I'll ask, hey, by the way, do you know anybody else? I ask the same question again. And then usually each and every single person will give me like 3 or 4 people, especially if I paid for the dinner.
Oh, yeah.
Then they're like, yeah, dude, like for sure. And then I'll have, from that one dinner, 50, 60 people.
Let's not forget to talk about that.
Yeah. So I do that. And then after that, I send them a calendar invite. In that calendar invite, there'll be a link for an intake form. That intake form has those 9 questions I talked about. Then they'll fill that out, and I'll be building up like information on them, how I can do assigned seating, all that kind of stuff. 2 days before the dinner, I will send out an email and give teasers as far as who's going to be there. So I keep it blind to what you said, but I'll give teasers like, the one we did in Waterloo. One guy raised $120 million last year for his company.
These guys are good dudes.
Another guy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Another guy was a former Olympic judo player and was building a co-working space. There was another guy who built it.
And you're getting this from their intake forms?
From their intake forms, or one of the reasons why I reached out to them.
Because one of the questions you asked is something like, what's one thing most people, like, what's one thing you're most proud of?
Yeah, what's your business brag? Like, and those kind of things. Yeah. So I'll send an email out to everybody as a teaser 2 days before to get them all like excited, like I wonder who that person is.
Dude, I don't do that. That's pretty next level too.
And I don't do it for all the dinners, but those like the ones I really
especially with cold, and you want to make sure that they show up.
Tease is brilliant.
At the end of the day, they're going to be looking at the calendar
tomorrow,
that night, and they're like, should I spend the night with my wife because I've been traveling too much, or should I go to this thing with a guy I don't really know?
Yeah.
So that helps.
So I do that, and then the day of, in the early afternoon, I text everybody from my phone and say, hey, it's Jason. Here's my cell number if you need it for any reason. And then that's a great way to get them, again, more anticipation. They're like, oh, this guy's really, on it. And then also if they're going to be like, oh, I'll be late or whatever, it's easy, and they have my cell phone number. Then when the dinner starts, usually I try to get them to kind of mingle first at like a bar or something like that, then get everybody seated at once. I wait usually till everybody's there or close to everybody's there before I get everybody seated, because what happens is some people will sit down, other people will be talking, all that kind of stuff. So get everybody seated, I set context by really, usually I start by saying like, let's order right away, because once conversation starts going, there's no stopping it. And if we don't order now, it's not going to get done.
That I will say, like, that is a very important thing. Is like you got to get the order early, because you can always stay longer if the convo's good.
Yeah.
But if people get a bounce and the food comes late, it's kind of an awkward thing.
Yeah. And then once orders are placed, then I'll call everybody's attention. I'll usually give context as far as why I'm putting on the dinner. I'll usually say that I didn't do it last night, but I usually say like there's an end time. You're more welcome to stay later, but I want to be respectful for those who want to have to leave at like 9 o'clock or those kind of things. Because that's the one thing too is you're in a dinner, you're like,
what was the context for the Waterloo one?
So I said, to what you said, I have a great network all over the place. I do these dinners all the time.
I live in this city and I don't know.
I don't. And in a small community like that, I mean, a company like Vidyard with 160 employees, they support the restaurant across the street. And that restaurant supports their employees. Like there's this tight ecosystem and nobody knows who these people are. And to me, to what you said, once you get to realize like the face behind the business, it makes you proud of the community, makes you want to invest.
Makes you love your city, man.
Absolutely. So I just kind of shared that. And then usually for me, introductions can go a little haywire. Either they go a little wrong, or people like they
people
go
doing full biographies.
They go long, or they go. They're super humble and they underplay themselves.
Oh, that's the worst.
Or they,
actually, that's
or
even more annoying.
Yeah, so that happens.
That's interesting. Is you would think it's the opposite.
So
no,
then,
you're right.
So then, what I try to do is have that information, and I'll brag on their behalf. So I'll go through everybody and make introductions, and I'll just be like their biggest fan.
That's high wire walking, though. I will say, like when you're taking the responsibility to do everybody's intro, it's like there's pressure. Like I don't want to miss something or undersell something.
If you know them, it's
or
easy.
Or fuck it up, or be like, their company name is.
So I don't. So I don't give. I don't share. It's not the focus isn't as much about like their bio, but why they're there, why I picked them.
I like that, and also
context is like
and how I know them, or
so they feel great about it.
But
other people.
But you did it last night because you knew everybody well.
Yeah,
you wouldn't have done that in Waterloo. I'm assuming
Waterloo. I did it, but I shared why they were there. I shared like. I invited Michael Litt because I think he's the unofficial mayor of the city. He's done so much great thing for the community, blah, blah.
Okay.
I invited Jim Estill because, he sponsored 56 Syrian families last year without anybody knowing.
Okay, but you're prepping this.
But this is coming through your intake form.
Yes, I know all this information from my research.
I know. You're 30 people. You prep this. Or is this just like your weird thing
No,
like you do?
I prep it a little bit, but there's a reason. Like if I reach out to somebody.
You actually remember it because that's the reason why I'm
there's
invited.
There's 2 or 3 deep reasons why I want that person at that dinner.
But that's like that uncommon attribute that you're remembering that no one else.
That's the thing that resonated with you. It's almost like, what do you think of that person? These 3 words.
Yeah,
why? It's because that's what I remember.
Yeah. So I'll usually say those 3 things, and then after that, I'll let the dinner go. And then towards the end of the dinner, what I did for the Waterloo one, which worked really well, was that at the end of dinner, I said, we're going to go one by one, and we're going to share. You're going to answer the question: if we were to meet a year from today with a bottle of champagne, what are we celebrating? And we're also going to answer the question, what do your friends reach out to you for the most when it comes to advice and feedback?
2 great questions.
And the great thing about the whole champagne, all their answers were really succinct. Some people talked about health.
Days, man.
Yeah, but some people talked about health. Other people talked about, we're raising funding, but then they give a little bit of context about their business.
And I love that you did it at the end of the meal because by that point they've built the relationship to then go, I want to help that guy.
And and it created a second wind of the dinner because they already had great conversations with the people around them. And after we asked that question to the group, people stuck around for another hour at the bar because they'd be like, oh, I want to talk to that guy because I can help him, or I want to talk to that guy for whatever the reason.
Interesting.
So that's the way we did it.
Dude, I'm seeing like the ultimate checklist PDF guide.
Yeah.
That you put like the phases and these things of like a menu to choose from because like this
almost
is
like a book on doing dinners.
almost, but not a book.
Almost. How long do you set the timeline for your dinners?
2 hours.
2 hours?
Yeah.
Okay.
2 hours.
So you get the ordering out of the way. So
nobody
then that's
ever
easy.
leaves, but it's one of those things, especially if you have kids and that kind of stuff.
And I always
want
like
that out.
To me, it's the calendar invite. So the lunches I always do 90 minutes. I do 60 minutes, but I plan for 90. So I do 90 in my calendar, 60 on the invite.
Yeah.
And for dinners, I usually do a 3-hour block on my calendar, 2 hours on the invite.
Yeah. No, that's
so intros, but I mean, like, so if you were, because like I did intros today at lunch. I will say, and that's why I sit in the center seat is to play the cop, right?
Yeah.
And I think you always want to choose somebody that you know is going to give a good intro, like Hebert, to kick it off because they set the tone. Because the last thing you want to do is give it to somebody super long-winded, and then everybody uses that pattern.
Or
and then you
somebody,
correct
and there's also to get back to what you did at Mastermind Talks Tier 1, like setting that tone of vulnerability. Because, I mean, if you're able to, like, we had one dinner, the one we did in Waterloo, where everybody's going around, like, business stuff, and then this guy named Jim shared, like, the champagne moment would be health, and he shared why that was important to him, and it changed the answers of everybody else. That it wasn't just about business. So you can either set that tone of vulnerability.
Yeah, you started off.
Or you can point to somebody who you know really well, who you know will set that tone for you.
And the other thing I do that I think is super fun is the plussing. So I always plus people. So you'll do your intro, and then I'll plus it by saying what most people don't know is...
That's what you do.
I love that.
At least the dinner.
Yeah, like as much as I remember to do it.
I was pointing at Saul. People can't see me pointing at Saul, but Saul does that.
I just think that plussing is just a really great way to honor somebody.
Yeah.
It's almost like a hat tip.
Yeah.
So when you do the intros or at the beginning of the dinner, you're the only one that speaks to the entire table.
Yeah.
No one else speaks to the entire table.
No.
It's only at the end with the champagne moment that they finally get.
I may get a few people last night. I'm like, I got them to explain their business a little bit better than I could.
Because Candace was supposed to do it.
She was supposed to do like one or two people I did not know.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally speaking, I do all the talking at the beginning. They talk at the end as far as like the champagne moment and what people reach out to them for.
Okay, and this is I think where a lot of people kind of drop the ball on their dinners. What do you do after?
So I actually record. So I usually, using that dinner as an example, I have a voice recorder. So I would walk around while people are explaining their champagne moment and explaining what people come to them for. And I captured all that, and then I sent a recap email afterwards, giving the names of everybody who was at the dinner, with everybody's permission, obviously, the names of everybody at the dinner, their champagne moment a year from today, and their what people could reach out to them for.
Does anyone have an issue that you're sharing their emails?
No.
Okay.
Generally, no, and that's actually part of
I've never had that, and even I've had some pretty...
That's in the intake form, too, is do you want us to share your email?
Okay.
And some people may say no, but then they'll say yes when they go to dinner because they just don't know what to expect. Who's
Yeah,
going to be
right.
there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then I'll send that follow-up email. Usually I try to do it the night of or the following morning, and then I'll usually have a group photo that I'll attach to it, and then oftentimes they'll take that group photo and share it on social media. And
I think that's actually a really important thing is to get the photo. And personally, if you want to get the photo, get it as soon as the plates have been laid from the waiters.
Yes, yeah.
Little tip
You don't
for
want dirty
everybody.
plates.
Don't dirty plates or an empty table. Get the meals out there. People, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
It represents the restaurant well. I mean, personally, I'm pretty lightweight where, as people are talking and I hear like, hey, do you have a card? I just go, if it's cool, I'll just send an email so everybody gets connected. Yeah. So it's kind of like I use the card asking as a way to get permission, and then I just send a follow-up. I used to do the whole like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn link in the follow-up.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't. My assistant did, and it just became like a 3-hour endeavor trying to find everybody's contact info.
Right, yeah.
So now I just, as much as I can, I try to use the business email versus a personal email so they have context. And a little information if I have about like who they are or whatever it is, but I'm not that next level on like that.
But it's not always like that. That is like when I really kind of go out there, which are maybe one out of every like 5 dinners.
Yeah.
Like last night, I connected on Facebook afterwards. We all kind of
dude, that was actually brilliant. We should share that because I'm going to steal that.
Well, I was in an Uber yesterday, and
that was not like a thing you do.
I
thought that was so smart. So essentially, he did a message on Facebook and brought us into the private message. So all of a sudden, now we have like a private group of everybody.
Oh, that's what I always do after dinner. I call it, as a joke, I always call it Tornado Mafia dinners. But one of my things I do is I ask everyone something personal usually, or now I've even started asking like, what's the one thing you need help with or whatever.
Yeah.
And so in my follow-up email, instead of doing an email, I do as a group message on Facebook.
I thought that was brilliant.
And then I have everyone's asks right there. So that's
you post the ask?
inside the group.
Wow.
Inside the group.
It creates like a very
everyone
lightweight.
remembers what was the ask.
Yeah, and then people are posting photos,
And people sometimes clarify. They're like, oh, no, you know what? This was my ask, but I actually wanted this instead. Done.
Yeah.
Can we get like last 2 seconds about the payment thing? And because I just wanted to chip in this.
Let's not
I
do
make people pay for the simple reason that I'm always uncomfortable when people give me anything for free. I've built my reputation on the fact that I accept nothing for free. So the reason I make everyone pay is to kind of like we're in this together. I'm doing, let's say, the headache of the logistics and bringing it together and the organizing and the food. That's why I always make everyone pay. Just everyone feels more equal.
I do it because I remember the time that somebody else picked, and it's all our own shit, probably.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
But like, I just remember like this sense of owing somebody I didn't want to owe.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to. I could have paid. Like, you didn't let me just like. It's like as if you think you're better than me that you're picking up the bill.
I get it.
Like, it's weird.
And I just in a professional capacity, weird amongst your friends. Like, it doesn't matter, right?
Friends,
like,
for sure.
then it's almost like a competition
Among
of
my
who
friends,
can
I'll let
sneak off
them pick
first.
it up. Like, you want to pick it up? You better pick it up.
Everyone's like, we're trying to sneak off
take
to
care of
pay
your
it.
kids,
Dan's like,
yeah.
yo, go for it. Don't worry about it. I'm good. So that's my logic. That's Dan's logic. Jason.
And I just want to say, I also think that anybody listening that's worried, because like that's a big financial investment. I mean, if you're spending $1,200 every couple of weeks to host these, so I just don't want that be an excuse for anybody listening to not take action.
It's good because, like I said, I talk about that in the book. Like, there's two schools of thoughts there, and
totally.
I guess for me, it's like it's a gift to have them there. Like that's their payment to me on some
totally.
level. And it removes all if it's a cold outreach to me. On some level, it removes that barrier to entry to be like, hey, the dinner. By the way, dinner's $100. At the same time, again,
but what do you say? Do you say it in
worried.
the invite? Like, I don't like. How do you say it? Like, is it I'm hosting a dinner and I want to invite you as my personal
Usually
guest?
I don't say anything, and they kind of
come. They
come with the expectation to pay,
yeah.
And then it's.
So it's more like a surprise.
I think that's the way to do it.
Yes,
you want them to come
surprise.
because they want to be there and they're willing to invest in a meal.
All right, we're gonna get kicked out. So thank you guys.
Dude, this is awesome.
This
so
was
good,
so much, so good,
so good,
Bye.
so fun.
All right, peace out.
Peace.
So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening. As mentioned at the beginning of this episode, we touched on a handful of concepts shared in my book, Mastermind Dinners, Building Lifelong Relationships by Connecting Experts, Influencers, and Linchpins. To my surprise, this book has sold rather well. It has an average of 4.7 stars out of 5 on Amazon over the last 215 reviews. Now, if you're a member of the Community Made group, you can get access to a free PDF version in the resource section. If you're not a member, lucky for you, it's free to join. Simply visit communitymade.com to get access. Also, as mentioned, we decided to take some of the concepts from the season on how to grow, nurture, and amplify your business relationships and teach it in a small, intimate workshop setting. I love workshops and intimate events, and to me, there's nothing better. So we announced the first one, it sold out. We decided to announce a second date. So for dates and availability on that, visit superconnectorworkshop.com. That's superconnectorworkshop.com. If you enjoyed this episode, show some love to Dan and Saul by taking a screenshot of your podcast app and pinging them on Twitter at Dan Martell, that's DANMARTELL, and Saul_Orwell, that's SOL_ORWELL. For more details on both of these fine gentlemen, visit danmartell.com and SJO.com. Both of these guys have fantastic newsletters, so if you like what they shared, I highly recommend you sign up. Before I go, I got to give a shout out to Amy Barrett for leaving the following review on iTunes. She said, just subscribed, and after the first episode, I was compelled to binge listen to the rest. Jason's transparency and willingness to be real and himself is inspiring. I resonate so deeply with the vulnerable story he shared about the dark side of entrepreneurship. It's incredibly valuable to hear from those who are further along than you. Amy, thank you so much for the review. For the rest of you out there, if you enjoyed this episode, or if you're a fan of what we're doing here at Community Made, I would be forever grateful if you would share this podcast with a friend, leave an honest review on iTunes or Facebook, just like Amy did. It goes a long way. Join me on the next episode where I share another intimate conversation with two other friends of mine, Derek Coburn, the co-founder of Cadre DC, and the oh-so-awesome Zvi Ban, who is the co-founder of a fantastic CRM platform called Contactually. In that episode, we go deep on how to implement a strategy to build a killer network from scratch, why lunches can work better than dinners when hosting busy professionals, and much more. I'll see you on the next episode. Enjoy your week.